Our next speaker is an author, a husband, a teacher, a counselor, and a friend. He has written over 80 books with over 7 million copies in publication. He is heard around the world and on 200 radio stations weekly. He has a very dynamic message to deliver to us this morning, and I know that he'll give us some good jokes. Gentlemen, please put your hands together for Mr. Steve Arterburn.
All right. Well, there's nothing worse than to be told that you're going to tell good jokes, because immediately people think maybe not. And I was just reading something yesterday about some of the irrefutable laws of good speaking, and that is that never tell a joke before 8 o'clock. So I hope you had some extra coffee there. But it's great to be here, Mayor. Great to be with you and all the rest of you. I'm from Indianapolis, and I was so looking forward to coming down here south where the weather would be better. And, of course, we landed yesterday. It was worse than it is in Indianapolis. So very typical of me to fly in here at this time. But I love speaking to men because we're just a little bit different than women. Well, actually, we're a lot different than women. You know, women know how to do romantic things. It just comes natural to them. And us men, we forget to do romantic things, like talk and stuff like that. And it's hard. It's difficult. You know, women want to connect with us, and we essentially just want to be worshipped. That's pretty much our deal. They want to know what's on television. We want to know what else is on television. We love the remote control. And the whole potty thing is just so different. You know, when women go to the bathroom, they get a whole posse of women up together. Helen, Louise, Cynthia, you want to go to the bath? And I've just never been attracted to that. You know, I'm Mayor, potty. I just, you know, it just doesn't work for me. In fact, I know most of you know that us men, one of our rules is we're not allowed to talk in the bathroom. You just don't talk to men in the bathroom. That's why our lines are not as long as the women's bathrooms are. But if I hear two men talking in a bathroom, I won't even go in there. I'm just not that secure. But I hope you're married to a woman unlike the gentleman on his 30th anniversary. Came down for breakfast, and his wife had prepared this great 30th anniversary breakfast for him, and she noticed he had a little tear coming down his cheek. And she said, "Oh, you have no idea what it means to me that on our 30th anniversary that you would be caught up in emotion and that you would be crying a little bit on the inside." And she said, "Tell me what you're thinking. Tell me what you're feeling." Well, you remember 30 years ago, you were pregnant and your father came over to the house with a shotgun and said, if I don't marry you, he was going to lock me up for 30 years, and today I would have been a free man. I hope you're not in that kind of situation. It's fun to be here with just Texas men. I'm from Texas. I'm a Texan at heart, and I was actually the namesake of my grandfather. He was a Texan's Texan. He was a John Wayne figure, and quite a hero in our town. He was the first man in Ranger, Texas to ever own a color television set. We thought we were, because Dad had bought this piece of cellophane with blue at the top and green at the bottom, but my granddad had the real thing. He was also the only man in town that had his own urinal in his bathroom. And I remember the Christmas where his 5 sons collected money and bought him his own wall-mounted urinal, the alabaster urinal with the silver handle. And I remember him crying as he opened it up on Christmas. And people would just see him and step back and admire him because everybody knew that he had his own urinal. And of course, if you know anything about old Texans, my grandmother, it was her idea just so that the sink could be cleaner. But anyway, he made his money in the oil boom days of Texas, not drilling for oil, but he had what was called Arch Tool and Supply, and they developed these fishing tools that weighed tons, and they would actually make them in the shop. And from very early on, I witnessed taking these tools, going down deep into the earth, and pulling out whatever was messed up and wrong with that well, and fishing it out, and then all of a sudden the oil's flowing again. He was quite a hero. He's very good at it. And so from early on, I was witness to the fact that sometimes you need to go deep and you need to fix some things that are down deeper. And I think with us men, it's a bigger challenge than with most. And a lot of times we don't do that, and we find ourselves full of rage, or we find ourselves plagued by addiction or depression or narcissism. And we think that it's a hallmark of a man not to have to go back and do some work inside. And it's really easy to get things wrong in this world and to live exactly the opposite way that we're intended to live. I remember hearing about the old man whose wife didn't hear very well. And he was in a romantic mood, and he just hugged her and said, "Honey, I'm proud of you." And she didn't respond. And he knew she didn't hear very well, so he just said a little bit louder, "Honey, I'm proud of you." And she still didn't respond, and so he just yelled, "Honey, I'm proud of you." And she looked at him and says, "And I'm tired of you too." So sometimes we get it wrong. It's easy to get things wrong. And when I was growing up, a Southern Baptist here in Texas, I got it wrong. I thought the Bible was something that just didn't apply. I thought it was my job to prove everything in there was wrong. And I thought that doing well was all about trying harder. And I tried, and I failed, and so I just eventually gave up. And I got into a very promiscuous lifestyle, and was probably the sorriest example of a Christian. And a few years ago, I was asked to speak at a chapel at Baylor, where I graduated. And I came back there because I wanted to help some other guys avoid what I had been through, and some other women. And so I said to them that I had come there many years earlier to get a Christian education, but what I got a girl pregnant. And I paid for her to have an abortion. And I told my story of how I really didn't think about what I was doing. I just did what you did. You just took care of it. And I didn't want my life to be interrupted by anything. And so I moved to destroy the life that I had created. And I shared with them that even an atheist, when you go to do something to destroy your own offspring, even an atheist is going to experience some kind of intrinsic guilt. And I've found that to be true. Throughout my life, I've read articles in secular magazines like Esquire and others about men who were part of an abortion. And even in secular magazines, they talk about the impact that it has on a person's life. And so I shared that with them, that I had paid for the abortion, and I hoped that it made an impact. I got back home and I received a phone call from someone I hadn't spoken to in years, and it was the young woman that I had been involved with. She said, "I heard you told our story at Baylor Chapel." And I said, "Yes, but there's no way you would be identified as the person." She says, "Oh, I know that." She said, "I heard that you told them that you paid for it." And I said, "Yes, I wanted them to know that I was responsible." She said, well, you know, next time you tell that story, maybe you should be more honest. And I said, well, what do you mean, be more honest? And she said, well, you didn't just pay for it, you pressured me to have the abortion. You made sure that I knew that you would not be there for me or our baby, and you pressured me, and I felt like I had no choice but to have the abortion. Well, so many years afterwards, to discover just how much of a coward I had been was quite a shock. And I went through a whole other grieving process. Because when that baby and my ex-girlfriend needed me, I was not there. And I've found over time that many times when someone wants an abortion, there is a man behind that desire for the abortion. Either he is simply not there, or he's pressuring. And it could be a physician, sometimes even a minister, a father, a boyfriend, a brother. Us men, we have an amazingly important role in a woman's decision of whether or not to have an abortion. And I think about all of the people that have been involved in abortions, and they don't realize that some of the difficulties that they experience today is because of the unresolved guilt and shame that remains there. You know, maybe they have a difficulty with their relationship with God, with experiencing God's grace. Like Joe, maybe never ever forgiving themselves, but never really admitting that that's what's there. Or maybe they have this incomplete grief that they carry with them. You know, when the abortion occurred and I woke up about 2 days later realizing what I had done, there was really nothing to grieve. There was no body, there was no funeral, there was no one to talk to. I was so full of shame and guilt, and so I struggled on my own, and I pushed it all inward. I ended up with about 80 ulcers inside of me. And one physician told me after a series of x-rays that, you know, if something didn't happen and this got worse, that I would eventually die. And fortunately, I was able to experience God's grace when I heard a man say, your past just ended 1 second ago in the eyes of God, and that it was my choice what to do with the future. When you pay for an abortion, there's a sense of finality that you don't experience with many other things, because it's one of those things that you can't undo, you can't reverse it, and you feel so alone. And I felt like that God had abandoned me. I felt like I had gone way too far, done too much, sinned too deeply for God to ever use me again. I was not aware that throughout Scripture, God had been using unlikely people to do unlikely things. And God had a plan for my life. And it was full of grace and restoration. So in the year 1990, I was asked to go to Atlanta, Georgia to speak to a group of African-American charismatic Christians. And obviously I'm not charismatic, and I had no idea why they would want me to come speak there, but I did. And when it was over, one of these wonderful charismatic women came up to me and said, God told me to tell you that you're going to have a baby. I explained to her that I had been through 7 years of infertility trying to have a baby, and that we had essentially figured out we were never going to have a baby. And she said to me, I don't care what you found out. God told me to tell you you're going to have a baby. She had a very bad attitude, and she was very pushy, charismatic Christian. You know how they can be. It was truly a word from the Lord, because on that same day, July the 3rd, I met with my publisher who lived in Atlanta, Victor Oliver, And as we were talking, he asked me what my wife and I were going to do about children, and I said, well, we're thinking about adopting because it's been 7 years. He said, well, my best friend's daughter, 16, is pregnant. The boyfriend's 16, and they've decided that the baby is going to be born, not aborted, and they're looking for a couple to raise their child. Would you like to meet them? Well, my wife rarely traveled with me. She seemed to really be enjoying the time away. But on that day, she was in Atlanta. I don't know if she was low on humidity or whatever, but she was there. And so on July the 4th, we met this couple. And they decided that we would be the parents when their baby was born. Well, this restored so much hope in me, and on Christmas Eve, we received a phone call that our baby had been born in Atlanta, so we traveled on Christmas Day. And interesting, the nurse brought the baby in. Her name is Madeline Victoria, placed her right in my arms, not in the arms of my wife, and placed her in my arms. And it wasn't just a baby, it was God giving back to me the very thing that I had destroyed years ago. And that is the kind of God of grace that we have. A lot of people don't understand that. A lot of people think that once you mess up, God wants you to experience all the guilt and the shame that you can possibly experience for the rest of your life. But God has plans for us. And that was just the first blessing. The second blessing was the life of my daughter that she lived. She is a wonderful human being. She's on the soccer team at Azusa Pacific University, sophomore. I think she is the only female that ever graduated from Laguna Beach High School, a virgin who'd never experimented with alcohol or drugs. And people often ask me, well, how do you raise a daughter like that? And I say, you have to have that daughter. She made her own decisions. And many of you know you can be the greatest parent in the world, but the kids decide. And my daughter chose some amazing things in her life, and I am so proud of her. When she filled out her essay for college entrance, I read it, and on there she said, I was adopted at birth, but it seems like it was always meant to be. And I think that is the goal of every adoptive father, that an adopted child would feel like it was always meant to be. And I hope that you have the pleasure of meeting her one of these days. If you're a man, most likely on most Saturdays you are watching sports on television. I will be watching What Not to Wear with my wife. It's a habit that she's gotten me into, and I don't know if have you seen the show? Well, obviously some of you have not, but it's a very helpful program. They help women not to wear stuff that us men don't like. Like they teach them not to wear anything that its name repeats itself within the name of what it is, like moo-moo. If your wife is waiting for that shipment of moo-moos to come in, it's a problem. But they also help men. They help us with our sex life. For instance, they recommend that we buy new underwear at least every 5 years. That, if you look in the mirror and you got that thing drooping down to your knees back there, the seat part, then maybe it's time for a new 3-pack or so of underwear. And one of the most helpful things they taught me was always take your socks off before you take your pants off in front of your wife, because no woman has ever seen a man standing in black socks with his little white spindly legs and thinks, wow, I have got to have that. I'm just trying to be helpful. Well, I was watching one day, as I'm forced to do, and one day they had this woman on. She just resisted everything that they were saying. This guy Clinton's on there, and resisting everything, and she was really in bad shape. I mean, everything that pooched out was given room to do that, and it was just a horror. It was a tragedy to see her. But this guy on What Not to Wear said, you know, sometimes you don't know you need help until you get help. And I just thought, wow, that is absolutely, positively, one of the most profound things I've ever heard. A lot of people walk around thinking that they've got it together, that maybe this issue doesn't apply to them, but until you ever sit down with someone else and come face to face with yourself, sometimes you never realize that you do need that help. I heard the story the other day of a golfer who was actually pretty good, but when he got up to the first tee, he swung and barely hit the ball, and it rolled about 10 feet right up into the rough onto the top of an ant bed. He was furious, walks over to the ball that's teed up on top of the ant bed, swings, wipes out about 1,000 ants with that first swing. More angry than ever, he swings again and wipes out another 1,000 ants on that ant bed. Two little ants talking to each other said, you know what? We're going to die if we don't get on that ball. And so I think sometimes it's important for us men to realize we're going to die emotionally, relationally, if we don't get on the ball and do something about it. A lot of men are walking around with a vulture of ungrieved loss. And we need to do the work that's necessary and resolve it and be the man so that we can do something about the problem of abortion. Did you know that in the African American community, 40% of all babies are aborted? In New York, 70% of all African American babies are aborted. You'd have to say it's the number one choice of birth control. If you travel throughout the state of New York, you will see what a nonprofit organization did. They bought some billboards with pictures of little black babies on them with the word endangered species. And if anybody's going to do something about that, it's going to be us men. This morning the words of a hymn just popped into my head. For you younger guys, hymns are an ancient art form of music that had stanzas and a common chorus with a catchy tune. Well, maybe not so catchy, but anyway. It's from this hymn, Rise Up, O Men of God, and the words came, bring in the days of brotherhood, and end the night of wrong. Rise up, O men of God. God needs us to band together. We need each other so that we can prevent a legalized genocide, so that we can lessen the incidents. The Bible says, hold back those staggering toward the slaughter. And we need to get help to heal our own wounds so that we can be the man and we can set the example. I don't know how many men are here this morning, but probably about 300. John Wesley said, if I had 300 men who feared nothing but God, hated nothing but sin, and were determined to know nothing among men but Jesus Christ and Him crucified, I would set the world on fire. John Wesley. And I think that the 300 or so men gathered here this morning could probably do that same thing, if it really mattered. And because you're here, I believe that to you it does. And so perhaps God has brought you here to hear that we need to band together and to rise up as men. Or perhaps God has brought you here to say, you know what, maybe it's time you quit messing around and get in and do something. Maybe you stop living on the fringe and you deal with that issue of pornography or whatever it is in your life, lust, that's keeping you from being active in this area. Ephesians 5:3 says not to let even a hint of sexual immorality be a part of you. And so as men, we need each other, and we need some courage to make some tough decisions and some tough commitments. How many of you ever been to Outback Steakhouse? There are a lot of people. Everybody, have you been? Maybe not. Well, at Outback Steakhouse, if you haven't been, they have a deep fried onion blossom that you can order. It's a whole onion dipped in batter and fried. And of course, most people are aware that it kills people every day. And if you go to Outback, if you look, because it is such a deadly food, they have defibrillators around the restaurant there where they are essentially, people are falling up, dropping like flies, really, and they're zapping them and bringing them back to life. And just to save the business, they don't take them out the front, they take them out back. That's why it's called Outback Steakhouse. If you don't want to experience that, when you're sitting there, you have to make a tough decision not to eat that. And it's not easy because everybody else around the restaurant's eating it. And I tell you, it's pretty tough to be a man and make a decision that goes against what everybody else around us is doing. But I just pray that just perhaps this morning, someone would be inspired to stand up and be one of the men that could make a real difference in this area and fight for these little babies. They can't speak for themselves, but they can sure use somebody else to speak for them. Last night, Michael Denton, over dinner, he said, every man that will be there this morning, he said, every man is in this room because someone made a decision for life that would allow them to be born. And I never really thought about that. But all of us are privileged to be here rather than to be part of 50 million people who aren't. And I'm so grateful that I get to speak to you, and I pray that some of you will decide that maybe this is the day to rise up and end the night of wrong. God bless you. Thank you for letting me come and share this story.